We're going to turn a little bit of time into Mr. David's life here today. So if you have a Bible, I invite you to find the book of 1 Samuel. It's somewhere about there. So if we go to 1 Samuel chapter 16, we see the opportunity that we have for Samuel to pick the new king. Saul has been removed from office effectively, and Samuel wants to pick a new king. So we've seen this passage before. So Samuel sets up this great offering. He's going to do a sacrifice. He's coming into town. Everybody gathers in town. Ironically, everybody gathers in town except for David. David is out tending the sheep somewhere, so he's not in town today. But in verse 7 of chapter 16, we see the Lord saying to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Now, Samuel had asked to see, the folks that Jesse's children, and they'd been brought down one at a time. And every one of them, the Lord said, "No, not that one. No, not that one. No, not that one." But finally the Lord said to Samuel, "Don't look at all those things. I want you to look at the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab, verse 8, had him pass in front of Samuel, but Samuel said, "The Lord's not chosen this one either." Jesse then had Shammah pass by, but Samuel said, "Nor has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, "The Lord has not chosen these." So he asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" Now you would have thought that if the prophet was coming to town, they were going to have a big offering and sacrifice, and this was going to be the event where the king was chosen, and he particularly asked this dad to bring his sons down so he could pick the sons. He would have brought all his sons, but somebody had to tend the sheep. So David was out tending the sheep. He says, "There is still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He's tending the sheep." Samuel said, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." So he sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." Now, among all the things that could have been chosen, or all the reasons that David could have been chosen, the one that God was really working on was, what is his heart like? Now, it appears that David was handsome. That perhaps he was a good-looking guy. Maybe he was tall and strong, and he certainly would have been well-baked because he was out in the sun, well-tanned. But God says, "Listen, I'm not looking for the outside." That's what men look for. They look on the outside. I want to look at his heart. And so he chose David because of his heart, because of what was on the inside. Now, the word for heart here in the Hebrew does refer to, similarly in our language, it's the inner man. It can even refer to the mind, the thought process, the heart, the soul. Hebrew, we see cardia. It talks about character or inner self. So God is looking at the inside. God is looking at the core, looking at what it is that David has that's locked in the center of who he is, the place where he makes his decisions. Acts chapter 13, when I think it's Paul at that point in time who is giving a sermon, and he refers back through the history of mankind, and he talks about David in particular, and he says, David, God said, was a man after his own heart, a man chasing after God's heart. What a great thing to have on your resume. He's 6'2", and he's strong and mighty, and he's got a great complexion, and he loves sheep. But the one thing that's really important is, what about his heart? Now, David didn't always get it right. David made some mistakes in his life, and we've seen that happen to every one of us at some point in time. And after David had made a fairly critical mistake, he wrote a psalm. And being a singer, he wrote a song, chapter 51 of Psalms. And he talks about his heart one more time. And so I want to go there for just a second. It says in chapter 51 of the Psalms, beginning in verse 10, it says, "Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me." Create in me a pure heart. Now, where David started was his heart was so special, so unique, so committed to God that he was chosen as the king. Your heart is good. But he went through many, many years between there and this song that he wrote in Psalm 51. And in those years he made some mistakes, and he knew that the problem was right at the core of who he was. The problem is my heart, God. So would you create in me? Would you help me to rebuild? Would you create in me a pure heart, God? Renew that steadfast spirit that I once had. So as we look at God's heroes, one of the places that we certainly need to go and focus on is our own hearts. God, if I'm going to be a hero for you, if I'm going to be the one who answers for the God of the universe, I need to look inside. I need to look at my heart and to ask if God, is there anything in there that I need to work on, that you need to work on, that I need to allow you to work on? And, I think that there's many ways that God does that. He asks us to remember what he has done. As David walked through that in that psalm, he says, I want you to restore the joy, restore the hope and the recognition that you forgive me. First off, David needed forgiveness at this point in his life. God, I want to have that joy. I want to have that excitement that I'm okay with the King of the universe. That's going to help my heart. Create in me, God, a cleansed heart, a new heart, a fresh heart, a pure heart. Boy, we've done a lot of hand washing lately, haven't we? we know a lot about cleaning up and making sure things are pure. I'm surprised at how long 20 seconds is when I go to wash my hands. Happy birthday to me twice, and I'm still washing my hands. It's you get self-conscious when you're in the men's room and there's 7 sinks and you're the guy who's still standing there washing his hands and everybody else has left. And you go, I'm going to do the 2 happy birthdays. I'm going to get my heart clean, my hands at least. So God says, I want your heart clean like that. I want you to really work at it. I want you to stay with it. I want you to consider what God has done. I want you to remember those things to help to work your heart back into a place where it is usable by the King. A pure heart, a clean heart, a holy heart, a committed heart, a dedicated heart. He says in there, also in that psalm, he says, I want you to not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. I want you to stay close, God. I want you in my proximity. Don't send me away from you. And even I want you inside to the best ability that it can be there. So I want to stay close to you, God, as close as I can get. And I need you to pour into me because I need your help to do this work. That's why David starts with create in me. It's not like David's doing this work. God's the one who's going to create in him. But David also knows, man, I need to know your salvation. I need to know your presence. I need to feel you within me. I need you to drive me from the inside. David is asking God, please create in me a pure heart. Help me to get that right. And he's at the verse 12 there at the bottom of that. He says, restore to me the joy of your salvation. Now, we've talked a bunch about being not so joyful lately.
with COVID going on and there's bad news at every corner, it's tough to be joyful. It's tough to find joy in the midst of the storms. But we all know, if we're thinking clearly, we all know that we're only here for a little while. Or we come into the world, we live our days, and we go on. Saturday morning, we talked a little bit about the knowledge that we are going home. The knowledge that we know the end of this story. We know we're here for just a short period of time. I know it looks like it's forever for us and it's all we have. But the reality, the Bible says that you were born into this world for a purpose, to do whatever God called you to do. And then He's going to take you out of this world. He's going to move you on to a place that's better and more glorious and more whole and more perfected, where God's presence will be there all the time. So in this period in between, just do your job. Just stay with it. Just keep walking with God. And we could have joy in the midst of that if we could remember, I'm okay. God has loved me. God has forgiven me. God has given me so many blessings right here, right now. And now His promise is that on the way out, I'm going to be taken care of. I'm going to go to a better place. I'm going to be there forever. And so that hope, that joy of salvation could change the way our hearts feel. If we focus on the bad, we've read that so many times before. Don't focus on the bad. Focus on the good, the joy of salvation. And David uses that to help him to be restored. And he finishes off his very last section there, verse 12 of the part we read. And grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. God, put into me a willingness to go and be what you want me to be. We talked a little bit, we prayed a little bit this morning about Bethany, my daughter, and her husband, Nace, out there in Montana. And they're deciding about a life-changing event right now where they would adopt this child and potentially. And it's so remarkable to me that they would commit their lives to doing this, because the boys they're looking at, the folks and girls they're looking at, they've got problems, they've got handicaps, they've got issues. And they're committing to say, I'm going to be in this for the long. I want to keep doing your will, God, and would you sustain me in that? And the knowledge that we are on track with God will change the way we feel about our lives. It will change our hearts. If we know we're on track with God, if we know we're doing God's will, then our hearts are renewed. So David, singing this song, he certainly renewed his heart in one way or another. But I want to go back to the story in Samuel, 1 Samuel again, and read the next piece down. If you flip over one chapter to chapter 17, verse 34, and David says to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear come and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. I just want to get that established out there. David has been in the field working with the sheep. He's been out there day after day after day. He even missed the party over here as Samuel came to town, because he's out there working the sheep. He's doing the job. That was not a famous job. That was not an impressive job. He was out of the way, quiet, isolated, to some extent isolated. It was a pretty thankless job. Nobody was there to say, great job, David, you did good. He was with sheep who were not noted for their intelligence. Oh, you dumb sheep, I got to deal with you again. David's out there day after day, year after year, being built by God, being readied by God for this particular event. So David's been trained by the simple things, by the mundane things, by the everyday things, to be able to do what God needed him to do extraordinarily. Now, chapter 17, as we get over there, is where God has set up this situation, and there's out there a Philistine, otherwise known as Goliath, perhaps you remember his name, and Goliath is out there threatening, taunting, making fun of God's army, and David shows up because he's bringing lunch to his brothers. His brothers are at the battle, but he's not at the battle. He's out tending the sheep like he's supposed to do. But he shows up at the battle and he says, man, I think I could take that Philistine on. But everybody else is saying, David, don't even think about it. So he begins with this explanation. Listen, I've worked hard out there tending the sheep, and I think I'm ready. I'm ready for this job. So we move on. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic, put on a coat of armor on him, a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened his sword over his tunic, tried walking around, because he was not used to them. He said, I cannot go in these. He said to Saul, because I am not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand. He chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. Now David is ready to go to battle for God. He knows God is the one who's with him and supporting him. He knows that this is a direct threat against God. And he has a confidence because of his training, his years afield, his years in the simple things. He says, I know I can handle this. And so God uses David because he's ready. He has a good heart, and he has some training. I did an extra batch of dishes yesterday because my wife baked. That was a lot of dishes yesterday, and so I did the dishes at Mom's house. Yeah, did I mention that? And then I came upstairs and I did the dishes upstairs, and then my wife kept baking, so I had to do dishes again. I was like 3 times doing dishes, and God was the one who was talking to me about this. He says, yes, so the training, Bill, the training. It's in the simple things. It's in the quiet things. It's in the unimpressive things. It's there that your heart gets trained. Now, we've perhaps heard about, what was his name? Lawrence, who said working in the kitchen was the best place to work on his heart. Brother Lawrence used to spend a lot of time just carving potatoes up, and in those times, God was working on his heart. He was working on humility, working on accepting what God had brought, working on not getting applause for what you do, just doing what God had asked you to do. And there's something in that training that God gets you ready for the big battle. And so we see here that David is in a catastrophic fight, a fight for his life now, but he's okay. He's ready for that because he's been trained and he is ready to take the course. Now, if we're honest, we don't really like training. Most of us would rather not train. We would not go out and run around the neighborhood if it weren't for some greater good. We would not like to push ourselves beyond our current limits. We like to be comfortable and at ease. So when God begins to train us, it's not comfortable. He asks us to move beyond our comfort zones and into some places where maybe he can use us in ways that we're not being used right now. So what has God trained you for? What has God built in you? What has God got you ready for? Because obviously David didn't think, wow, I can't wait for the opportunity to fight Goliath. He just hung around and did what God wanted him to do. And then God put him in the place where he said, now I can use you. Now we can put this to good use. Well, we kind of know the end of that story. That at the end, David wins the battle. And Goliath goes down, and it's amazing. It's amazing what God did through David. It's amazing that God worked that victory through him. So God gives us the chances to go out there and work for him, but he doesn't always guarantee that it'll come out the way we thought it was going to come out. I think of David coming at him with the stick, and Goliath is like, you got to be kidding me, I'm just going to eat you up, and it's going to be a terrible disaster. And David goes forward with a confidence that says, my God will take care of me. But I also recognize that, there's a story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego who were in a fiery furnace situation, and their comment to the ones who were fighting against God's people, their comment was, I know my God can save me, but if he doesn't, it's okay. If he doesn't save me, it's okay. I still trust him. I still believe in him. I'm still going to follow him, even if things don't go the way I thought they were going to go. David was willing to go into that battle, no matter what. Most of the rest of his buddies, including his brothers, were all shying away and going, oh boy, I don't know if we should go in. But David said, I'm going in. I'm ready to be used by God. So he starts with his heart. He puts up with the training, even if it's not fun. And finally, God uses him powerfully to bring a victory for God. Maybe it didn't look like what David thought it was going to look like. In his case, it worked out good. But maybe in another case, it won't look like what we think. God still calls us to it. God still calls us to be what he needs out there in the world. So maybe it's your backyard and dancing this afternoon. Man, I feel like dancing. And if you'd like to send a video back, that would be good. We'll post it on our website, unless you're embarrassed, in which case we won't post it on our website. But whatever it is that God has called you to today, whatever God is calling you to do, maybe it's the mundane, maybe it's washing the dishes today, do it well, trusting that God's going to use that to build your heart, to make you into what he wants you to be, what he needs you to be in the future. And trust him that God will be there in the battle. Keep your hearts clean. Keep your hearts strong. God bless.